Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about the future of Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires, and specifically the future of Bretonnia. Creative Assembly has revealed a whole bunch of information, as well as some information that was leaked. Whether or not those leaks end up being true or not, that is its own discussion. Did a video on the subject. But what is missing is any kind of detail as to the future of Bretonnia. Because of all the races in the game that could use a genuine improvement is Bretonnia. And it's not just a question of the race in itself, it's also a question of the campaign dynamics, the terrain of Bretonnia itself as a province. And this is something that affects every single campaign that has to focus on Bretonnia. It affects Ikaclaw, it affects the Wood Elves, it affects Grom the Paunch, it affects Mogr, whoever cares about Mogr. Because you see, Bretonnia as an area of the campaign map is made up of a bunch of these provinces with just 2 regions. And this is not an especially great thing to deal with. It means your settlements will grow slower, the distances between settlements are of such a nature that defending this territory, especially because of the ports that exist over here, becomes difficult. And this is where Creative Assembly could definitely do better, improving Bretonnia, adding some terrain changes, and hopefully with Lords of End Times they will do exactly that. Otherwise, these campaigns will continue to suffer. I understand that there's limitations on what they can do with the map, but it's not necessarily a question about changing the map, it's a question of changing the provinces, and there's certainly room in these locations to add more settlements. And there are a lot more factions or sub-factions of Bretonnia, duchies or provinces of Bretonnia that are not currently present in Warhammer 3. This would benefit every single faction that has to interact with Bretonnia. With the exception of Karl Franz, who would actually end up being the biggest winner just because he gains population surplus and can use it, and that's the reason Bretonnia is great for Karl Franz, especially when we think about the River Brienne with its wonderful Bordelot port that also produces a lot of wine, growth, etc. But the tradable resources this port produces is ridiculous. And that is a benefit to a lot of different factions. For every other province of Bretonnia, with the exception of maybe Couronne to some extent, it's usually not worth it to invest too much in Bretonnia in itself. And that is really a shame because Bretonnia could end up being far better. When we consider the faction dynamics of Bretonnia, they do get a lot of growth in their provincial capitals. Actually, I think it's the single highest growth that you can get in the entire game, because it's not just a simple question of like, oh, your baseline settlements are at 20, go to 40, go to 60, go to 80 at tier 4, and then 100. Though I'm not sure exactly what's the value of having 100 right there. Well, obviously for minor settlements, but in just these 2 region provinces, not necessarily as much. However, it's also the thing that Bretonnia has a significant level of control that they deal with. They have a commandment that gives them 10 control, so you also end up having the extra benefit of high control in terms of growth. And that is not something to be underestimated in terms of how they grow their settlements. But here's the catch. It is great for Bretonnian campaigns to be played outside of Bretonnia. This is the reason Albric can work out quite well. This is the reason Rapance can work out quite well, because they benefit from that growth. But playing a campaign as Bretonnia in Bretonnia is something of a downside. So I would say region changes combined with maybe the way the settlements work in itself, because there's some ridiculous nonsense that actually needs to be addressed over here with the way settlements work. You require a windmill in order to get peasant bowmen with pox arrows. Requiring a building for a variant of a unit is very old school, and this is one of the reasons Bretonnia does need an update. When would that update come out? I don't know. Some speculation, I think, would be in between Bakshiva and the Lords of the End Time, so maybe 8.1 or 8.2. It could be coming out some free content or a racial update to Bretonnia, but this is one area that I would definitely focus on. Then, of course, we should talk about the lackluster infantry of Bretonnia, which is kind of the single worst infantry in the game. The only upside, if you will, is that eventually, if you play a long enough campaign, you can get armory, which gives you 2 armor for all armies. But that doesn't fix the leadership aspect, nor will these infantry units ever stand compared to everyone else. The fact that foot squires are a tier 4 unit, when in reality they should be tier 3, is honestly ridiculous. Especially considering Grail Knights are a tier 4 unit, so Grail Knights should not be tier 4 when foot squires are tier 4. Though one can definitely argue that yeoman units, mounted yeoman and just spearmen at arms, should be recruited from every single settlement, because Bretonnia is one of the only races in the game, or the only race really, that functions as a regular race that can't recruit units from normal settlements. They need a barracks for everything. And it would be really good if they could at least recruit some units from regular settlements as opposed to needing a barracks, especially when you really want to get archers, you want to get knights. Speaking about knights, you do have to consider like knights errant, kind of okay for a tier 2 unit compared to some other things, sure, but there are races that do it better, and that is kind of the problem. The only benefit in terms of cavalry that Bretonnia has compared to other races is supposedly their special stances, which don't end up being as significant of a benefit as one might believe, and also the fact they have flying cavalry. It's really the flying cavalry and the mobility that those flying cavalry units provide, the Royal Pegasus Knights, and Royal Hippogriff Knights, that make Bretonnia stand out. Another benefit is that they can recruit field trebuchets at tier 2, even though getting blessed field trebuchets at tier 5 is ridiculous. And honestly, kind of not worth investing into it, like by the time you actually get to it. Bretonnia could, in all certainty, use a variant of the warband upgrade system, because that would fit their race so very well. You think of the path of a knight errant, you think of what knights are going out there. They start at knights errant, they go to Knights of the Realm, they then become questing knights. And by the way, Pegasus Knights are basically Knights of the Realm with a Pegasus. They can just afford a Pegasus. That's something that would be very befitting Bretonnia, and maybe something with the man-at-arms as well. Like, Bretonnia, again, would really benefit significantly from a warband upgrade system. Peasants upgrade into peasant units, knights upgrade into higher level of knights if they earn their experience, if they survive. And that would be a really good thing and a proper mechanic for Bretonnia to really have as a race. Yes, you can use the warband upgrade mod, and I'm not certain why Creative Assembly has been so stingy with regards to using that mechanic for more races in the game, because it's such a great mechanic that Warriors of Chaos have, and only they have. I understand it's a core part of their mechanic, but of their race, but it's something they could definitely use all around to create an army that you build up, you use, and you're using it throughout the course of your campaign. Because currently, as it stands, you can recruit higher-end units, but given the pacing of the campaign, you're usually just going to end up recruiting a higher-end army, and then by the time it even arrives in the front line, you kind of don't need it a lot of the times, if you're playing in a fairly aggressive fashion. Another aspect to be said about Bretonnia is that their legendary lords could definitely use unique mechanics. So Rapance and to some extent Albrecht do have unique mechanics. Well, for Albrecht, it's just that he has sea attacks for himself. Rapance has water in the desert, but outside of that, the faction effects, the lord effects themselves are fairly lackluster, and that is an area that Bretonnia could definitely benefit from Creative Assembly. You do have the vows, but the vows themselves do not feel in any way, shape, or form meaningful enough to justify the investment required. The only reason you invest in the vows is to reduce the upkeep required for various knight units, which, by the way, lore-wise, Bretonnian knights would not serve under a lower-ranked knight in battle. That's just kind of the factor of it. Like, Grail Knights would only serve under a Grail Knight. I understand why they do it from a campaign standpoint, but it is a ridiculous one. Besides, it should only really affect your faction leader and not so much necessarily the other lords that you do have in your campaign. And that, by the way, is the problem of Bretonnia, that you have to, every single time, go through this process of doing vows on every single lord in order to reduce their upkeep, or frauds, in order to reduce their upkeep, in order to use them. Like, for instance, this lord, if you're wondering what I'm using her for, it's because I'm using her for looter. Bretonnia has a weird mechanic with looting. They supposedly get punished for looting settlements with chivalry, but in reality, they end up having plus 50% income from sacking settlements if you keep looting settlements. The reason I didn't do so is because I used a lot of Confederation in this campaign. Or rather, I rushed to take out Kemmler over here, which you can do. You take out the initial settlement, then you rush over here to Artois to prevent Kemmler from interfering there. Gotta play those first few battles carefully. You save Artois, and eventually you can confederate them, or you can leave them into the dust. It is a decision. But what is genuinely a question mark is why exactly we still have this research tree. A research tree that limits your confederation options with everyone except Rapons, who has regular confederation. And you don't even get to guarantee confederation when you complete this. Never mind that virtually all of these factions except Bordelot and Carcassonne are minor factions that are actually going to be wiped out fairly quickly. Think of it. Paravon is the initial enemy of Orion. Aquitaine, the initial enemy of Grom. They're going to be wiped out. Artois is the initial enemy of Kemmler. So this entire research tree over here is not adding all that much. Yes, eventually you get unification of Bretonnia, you get the legendary lords, but it is a lot of time wasted to research that. There are more useful things over here with regards to, say, water pumps and improved construction, absolutely, but you kind of want to deal with the Confederation, if only to get the other legendary lords. Not that the legendary lords themselves have all that much to offer. The Fey Enchantress in particular is kind of meaningless. Albric is definitely worth it, though he's on the other side of the ocean, so you're going to have to get him back. Lewin is obviously great from a skill line standpoint and a pure combat standpoint, undeniably so, as well as plus hero capacity for paladins. But what stands out to me is that the generic lords and heroes of Bretonnia do not have special skills, and again, this is one of the reasons Bretonnia could definitely use an update. I suppose the question with all of these things is, what exactly is stopping Creative Assembly from doing anything with Bretonnia? Like, is it just a desire for them to keep it a free faction and not do any kind of DLC, paid DLC for them, and as a result of that creating problems in terms of the development schedule for them? Is it a question of how Games Workshop imposes limits on what they can do with regards to old world content? Because we do have Foot Knights in the old world, and those would serve very well within the context of Warhammer 3. Those are big questions, but from my view, I think of all the factions that are a missed opportunity and should definitely get a rework, Bretonnia would stand out. And I think it is telling, as a conclusion to this video, that in spite of all of the leaks, all of the information, leaks that have proven true, leaks that have proven false, though, I would say we've gotten fairly accurate leaks in terms of the ideas that Creative Assembly wanted to do. Like, for instance, there was a leak back in, 2024 about Creative Assembly wanting to do Nagash and Nephrata as part of the DLC, and they are coming in Lords of the End Times. We're going to get, most likely, Tankwall. There was a leak about Moonclaw, which may end up to be true, but nothing whatsoever on the subject of Bretonnia does make one think. That's all I had to say on this subject. Costine here signing out. Stay tuned for more, and I'll see you boys and girls on the next one.